What is spirituality? It simply is moving through the day completely myself. The irony is I had forgotten myself. And the sign I had is that I began to cry out, seek out, beg for, bargain for the very things I'm made of. Peace, love, truth, trust, beauty, lightness, looking outside for the very things that I am. This is the sign I had forgotten myself. And so my day became a constant hunt, constant taking from outside. I use these quiet moments when I am still to remember, to reconnect. I am a spiritual being expressing through this body. I am not the image. I am not the labels. I'm not anything temporary. I'm much deeper than that and eternal. I, the soul, am a very free being of spiritual light energy. And my true nature, in essence, my true self, is peaceful, loveful, light, benevolent, harmonious, pure-hearted. That is who I am. More time I can spend absorbed in the experience of who I am, as well as exposing myself to a very pure vibration, which we can call God, that melts away who I am not. And the closer and more natural my true self will become, I will start to live spiritually, that is, go through the day simply being myself. Om Shanti.
Shanti. Good evening to Interview with the Raj Yogi. And tonight's topic is bringing spirituality to life. And again, these sessions are inspired by what we're learning in morning class. So I was reflecting quite a lot about, you learn that in the Raj Yoga course that as a soul, we're very subtle. And so hearing some of the experiences you've shared, sharings you have shared from others, we as souls are so subtle, and yet for someone who feels very physical to be able to actually feel that vibration from us, feel something that's so invisible. So that's really what inspired this topic. And so I remember there was this one situation when you were at the fitness center, and I'm not sure what you were doing, maybe stretching or exercising, maybe putting everything together, getting ready, but you went to close the door or something like that. And someone said that they saw you and they just felt so peaceful. So I was just wondering, in terms of your thoughts of this aspect of bringing spirituality to life, for it to be tangible to others, and yet it's not a physical thing, why we have to be sort of, accessible to others just in our way of being and in our way of studying.
I think there's two aspects to this. One is, as a student of spirituality, that regardless of the outcomes, whether or not anyone notices or not, I enjoy studying spirituality. I enjoy learning how to live spiritually. To me, that's the topmost thing. And I enjoy so much that I practice regularly. I'm very consistent in my practice. And what will happen if I'm consistent in my practice is it will become natural. Once it starts to become natural, that's when it starts to touch other people without me thinking about it or trying. The moment I try, it's almost as if I stop being spiritual. So I'm just practicing regularly because I enjoy it so much. And then, we see this with other people, whatever they do frequently, this is how we start to naturally see them. So if we're practicing spirituality regularly, then it will become natural. And this is just how people will experience us without us trying to do anything.
One of the things that came to mind about this topic was about integration. We've spoken about integration in the past, so maybe, as if someone who's just come on and hasn't heard any of those topics. But we often share that Raja Yoga is open eye meditation, open eye study. And in terms of this aspect, you're talking about natural. Because I was thinking about, in contrast, if I'm closing my eyes, and that's my only practice, is closing my eyes, or I'm always in isolation. So you're doing that every single day, but I was thinking about the integration piece in terms of natural. And I feel that you're implying that, you're walking and moving around and something has, come into your day-to-day sense of being.
So there's so many ways to describe or define spirituality, but one, of course, is to live pain-free. And when I say pain-free, it's without that sorrow, without that reactivity, without that sense of of being influenced so much. So in physical fitness, we also have this hope of being pain-free. And I know it's questionable for some, they like to feel the pain, but the idea is that I'm stronger in my day-to-day life. What happens with some souls who sort of are figuring things out is they approach their fitness regime as, stronger, heavier, etc. And it would seem they're getting stronger. It looks like they're doing, what is normally defined as getting stronger, but they actually find they're experiencing more pain. And eventually, if they're smart, they seek out something called functional fitness. So classic example is someone who lifts very heavy weights, but during the day they're seated a lot, they're at the desk a lot. And so they experience a lot of pain and tightness in these muscles that they're developing so much. And they eventually say, you know what, this isn't feeling healthy. I feel I need to approach and have an approach to fitness that makes sense in my day-to-day life, pain-free. So they start to do functional fitness, which means fitness that is relevant to my day-to-day life, that acknowledges my day-to-day life. So then I start to explore a different concept of fitness that is integratable, if you will. And the same happens, I think, with spirituality, that we have some concepts of spirituality. You say to someone, let's meditate, which is very deeply connected to spirituality. And they immediately want to sit down a certain way, close their eyes, all sorts of things. It's almost like Pavlovian conditioning. You say the word meditate and assume the position. And I do this, but then I start to notice that all of that time I'm clocking isn't actually making me pain-free during the day. I'm still being affected by things. I'm still being influenced. And so at that moment, that's a breakthrough moment where I might say, maybe my approach to spirituality isn't integratable, isn't functional spirituality. Maybe I need to relook at things. And this is really, I think, what open-eyed meditation is symbolizing, is a different approach to spiritual practice. It sort of is a symbol of that. It's not just about, I'm going to keep my eyes open. I can still be doing the same old thing, but now with my eyes open, it's inviting me to have a very different approach to my spiritual practice.
It's interesting because as you were sharing, many hear the word meditation, or they might even hear the word spirituality. And it might not even be apparent, but this sense of checking out, a sense of receding or letting, like giving up on things, running away, and which is obviously the opposite of functional. But the reason why it's quite interesting, because I'm trying to paraphrase it in a way that feels meaningful for individuals. When we hear something like "you are soul," it's like as if we hear in isolation that, that means there's just, what does physicality have to do with everything? Or even when you hear spirituality, I really feel as I continue through these years in the study, spirituality already implies that that you're actually living whilst you're in physicality. But the reason why I'm wondering is when it comes to something like vibration, that someone could just be in your presence and they can really feel that. And it has a lot to do with how much you have really felt a sense of you whilst you're walking, moving around, whilst your eyes are open. Like for others to feel spirituality is actually relevant to them who may not have interest in it or may not be something that is, I guess, a priority, but it catches their attention dependent on your level of what you have experienced at a very grounded level.
So in movement, there's this idea of muscle recruitment. So I am intentionally activating a muscle as I'm executing the movement. And it's a very kinesthetic thing. So, for example, if I was to ask everyone to lift their arm, we do it a gazillion times and away we go. But if I ask you to focus on the drivers that lift the arm, even before lifting, I want to focus on that which lifts the arm. There's different muscles that are involved, and activate them before I even lift the arm. Activate them. This is a very challenging thing for souls actually to do, even physically, but it's super important spiritually. It might seem odd to say that to experience myself to be a soul is almost a kinesthetic experience. I want to recruit an experience. So I might visualize things or imagine things or think things, but it doesn't mean I'm actually doing the thing. I want to feel it. So when we say very simple, I, the soul, am separate from the body, I want to go into that experience where now it's not that I have a point in the center of my forehead, but I am that point, and the body actually belongs to the outer world. I want to feel that. Until I do, I'm not going to get the benefits. This is obvious in physical fitness. Until I actually activate the muscle, there will be no strengthening or change. So it's kind of obvious. I could imagine it or mindlessly do it, but to recruit, to kinesthetically do something, to feel it, is night and day. And I think that's a really important art to develop within the self. There was a beautiful commentary, and it still stays with me. I really enjoyed it. It was about connecting to God. And again, the idea of the Supreme Soul that we work with is that the Supreme Soul is a soul like me, an invisible, subtle point of non-physical energy, spiritual energy in a realm of silence. And we have lots. You probably, if you joined meditation at all on any, you'll see us showing a video of our, of the Supreme Soul, this beautiful image, radiating light, rings, aura. It's gorgeous. So what might happen is that I might visualize that. And it's not that there can't be a visual with it. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I want to experience in a very concrete the presence of that being. Almost as if it's not a one-way, but a two-way. I'm receiving something from that being. I want to experience their presence. And that requires a lot of intention and focus and subtlety and silence. So that's what I need to check for myself. Our previous history with God was a lot of chattering, a one-way dialogue. So it's very difficult for us to break out of that. We could say, I love you, God, I love you. And I'm not actually, it's going into ether. I'm not actually connecting to a being. I want to actually be silent and allow myself to feel the presence of that being. That's when I start to get the benefits of that connection.
This is a question that was from a student from a few days ago, but it's relevant when he had asked, how do I know I'm making progress? So someone may ask, how do I know if what I'm feeling is a real thing or something that, I'm just making up? It does feel like souls, because I remember this came up a few years ago. Actually, it was in a public program too, when someone had asked, like, what's the difference in visualizing? Maybe it was they were asked, and maybe a guided commentary, I don't remember. Or am I really feeling it? Like, is there a way that I can discern it? Or is it just as I continue to study, I just have the capacity to feel what's real and what's not?
So again, we could use the example of fitness. A soul who just had an operation, but they came back very quickly because they were healthy going in. So they were sharing a sweet story where in their home, they have an attic crawl space and they had stored some things up there. But to get up there, as it is in many of these character houses, it's sort of the ladder that you climb up and there's a hole. And then the idea is you put your arms on what is the floor of the crawl space and pull yourself up. And he found that this was before he was training, he couldn't do it. It would be a single pull-up that he's trying to do, we would call it, but he couldn't pull himself up from the ladder into the crawl space. And so the sign that he is progressing in his training is if he would, on a later occasion, which he now can't, be able to pull himself up, what we call power. And the same applies spiritually. So I'm going to be able to measure that in two ways. I don't necessarily have to wait for a challenge to know whether or not I've acquired power. That is one way, though, that how do I respond to situations in which used to overwhelm me? That's definitely a measure of whether or not I'm progressing or accumulating power. But the other one is to simply observe my inner activity. There are signs that a soul is progressing that really can be measured. We got one of them today, where the temperature of my inner world remains cool. That was a big one today. Cool meaning calm, peaceful, this kind of speed inside that's very slow and easy and steady. And I also would be thinking less, because a lot of our thoughts are actually, when we start, we're told that waste thoughts are almost 90% of what we're doing. So if the waste is going down, which is a sign of power, then I'd have less thoughts, different quality of thoughts, slower, deeper speed. Just the same as when breath is one of the ideas we use in spirituality. Someone who's training their breath becomes slower and longer. So this is also the tempo that would be happening inside. Deeper, slower, different quality of thought, vision changes, attitudes. So I can just check my inner, we call it introspection, check my inner world, not have to wait for a challenge, but there are some other signs of power.
When you were sharing, I was thinking about that. Even vibration is completely invisible. And for someone, let's say that, spirituality is something that they have no clue about anything. And it can definitely be a challenge because everything is so measurable and tangible. How would you help someone understand what exactly it is? But, even though we know that when someone's got this certain vibration, this vibe, I think it's quite unconscious at times, perhaps. Maybe they're like something about that person, and maybe they won't be able to put their finger on it. But, I was thinking about how that even works, that our thoughts can really create a certain feeling that others can actually feel. And because it's all a part about bringing spirituality to life, because at the end of the day, how someone feels in your presence, how someone feels in a certain function, it's really oftentimes that's all that they remember.
When I set out this morning and was driving the car to work, there were two things that happened that really touched me. I don't know if these exist wherever you are listening, but here we have these what we call unregulated intersections. They have four-way stops, but not lights. So this is a very courtesy type of situation. Those who arrive first get to go first, and then there's the right of way if you arrive at the same time. So in a couple of situations, it was very interesting because I came to the intersection and it was actually my turn to go. But just as I was going, pedestrians were crossing the street. And usually what happens then is the other cars take their chance since I can't go. They'll say, but no, everyone waited. They knew it was my turn to go. And I know they knew because once the pedestrians crossed, they still waited until I had gone. And the vibration in the intersection was almost divine. It was so beautiful. Right. And so we're very sensitive to these types of things. But the other thing that, as again, I was continuing, and it was these pedestrians. One was a young family with little toddlers, and we're watching. Maybe that's why the driver stopped, because they were just so mesmerized by this toddler because they look so cute. Oh my gosh, they just look so, we go, we were that once. We were that cute little cherub, and the vibration is so powerful. So everyone can feel that. Maybe we don't quite understand what's going on. So we often connect the word spirituality with purity, that very sweet, innocent, simple, uncomplicated vibe of an infant. I think everyone can understand that. And we kind of miss that. At the end of life, we're always like, I want to return to that. It's not that I want to become a baby again, but that vibe is so uplifting for us. So I think souls do understand what the destination is.
Well, that was beautiful sharing that. I think I almost forgot what my question was. But I know we're running out of time right now. Just about being a soul. It's such an invisible thing. And yet you're saying there, you look at children, it just feels like as if we really just got evidence all over the place around us in terms of that. And you can just talk to someone who has no, I guess not even just any interest or knowledge of spirituality. Just our sharing about these things really becomes quite meaningful to them as well. But just in terms of the last thing about being souls and vibrations, and maybe this is more of a, I wouldn't say a scientific question, but scientists are always, I suppose, interested in looking at wavelengths. And if you know about light, it has a certain wavelength, and there's X-rays and infrared and gamma rays and so forth. So it's interesting that spirituality, I don't know, maybe after taking physics, it was quite a long time ago, it felt like as if spirituality exists still on that spectrum, but is way, 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 way on one other end, that even animals can feel something just from your vibration as well.
Yeah, science is in such a challenging situation because they have such an interest to understand the subtle, the more and more the contributions of science to our day-to-day life are very subtle technology. It's quite remarkable. So there's such an interest, and yet they still have this sort of loyalty to the empirical, that it has to be something physically measurable. So it puts them, how far can they go before they'd have to make that leap? And they dance with it. They do acknowledge that their discoveries are affected by the observer, which is, again, a non-physical thing, but they're really definitely challenged. But I think that if they looked at themselves, it's kind of an interesting situation. If they just studied themselves, I think they would have to acknowledge that the things they care about the most are actually not physical. And this was, supposedly, for example, Einstein really felt science should serve spirituality, quality of life, and acknowledge that science will only be as good as the user, the character, these, again, non-physical things. So it's not to deny the usefulness or value of science, but know that it really can't live in isolation. And so, yes, it's got this quandary of how far can I go on the spectrum? I will have to leap into the non-physical. But I think even then, it's a play between spirituality. One of the experiments I enjoy doing is, it always seems this way, but when I have to go get the annual medical exam, they have to take your heart rate, etc., your pulse. And it always seems that the appointment is right after I have some crazy physically arduous workout. So I'm always feeling this isn't going to be a valid reading. My heart rate must be off the scale. And so I just sort of sit there and just kind of, yes, go into that spiritual practice, if you will, only to know, will it affect the heart rate? So what it's suggesting is that in some subtle way, some indirect way, and by the way, it does, the heart rate, so some indirect way, science is touching that spectrum. It's just using the measurements it has at hand, but it might, choose to measure the heart rate or the electric rhythm of someone who is meditating and contrast it. So it's trying to access that world. And I kind of appreciate that because I think many people won't really venture into it unless they have some sort of concrete result. So science could really be of use in convincing people there's very concrete results. How many times does someone who has anxiety or heart problems, they're told by the doctor, you really should take up meditation. It's shown to help with the heart issue or the anxiety. So I think there's a beautiful possibility there that it's indirectly kind of touching that invisible part of the spectrum.
Sorry, just that last, you were making me think about a long time ago, science and religion were actually together in the Renaissance period. So maybe that is, of course, possible then. So we are way over time, so we will have a little reflection.
I think about what my objective is as I go through the day. What am I trying to achieve? Yes, I'm living my life, but what is the objective? Is it to acquire money? Is it to acquire relationships, possessions, status? What am I trying to achieve? It might be one of those things, but then the question is why? Why do I want to acquire these things? And if I continue to ask myself why, I might land up at the same point, objective as every single being on this planet. I want to be happy and I want to be peaceful. Perhaps there's another path to achieve that aim, one that doesn't go through the outside world, but happens through my inner world. Turning inwards, I begin my journey towards that objective with the faith that through spirituality, through understanding myself to be a subtle being filled with those qualities I seek outside, I can reach the destination of peace and happiness on the inside. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you for those who joined with us. But a special thanks to Judy, because you never know what topic is coming up until 10 minutes beforehand. And actually, I may have an idea. Well, that's the point, is something that I'm thinking of through the day. So you're always on the hot seat. So thank you. There's a heater right here beside us. And so just wanted to remind souls that we do have a workshop, a monthly workshop, which is coming up on May 7th. Usually it's on a Saturday, so I'm not sure if we're starting to move things onto a Sunday. So that is, Sunday is what I noticed. And so feel free to visit the center's website. And we'll certainly be trying to keep up with just posting upcoming sessions on there too, if we're ever incorrect about anything. Lots of online sessions for sessions, English and Hindi, on-site sessions in English if you're interested at the Academy on Saturdays at 12:30, as well as on Mondays at the Inner Peace Center at 6:30 p.m. On-site English meditation as well on Fridays, 6:30 p.m. as well. But all of that is on the website. If you have any questions as well, feel free to send an email. Thank you for joining. Om Shanti.